certainly the application process itself is sort of a communication to the community. We want you to sit on this committee. We want your input but if the selection committee is utilizing this document, then that will be reflected throughout the process in which they select that person. So Mr. Hampton, if you don't have a copy of that race equity toolkit, I'm sure Karen can send it to you, because it was created with that very intention, that before persons are put into positions of decision making or policies or practices are implemented, that you're exactly right, that those communities of colors or people who are affected by whatever the policy or practice may be have the ability to engage in that process. So, if I get selected to sit on that committee, I'll tell you that I think that by virtue of using the equity toolkit, that's inevitable.
And the reason I concur with the judge is because I don't want to get in the habit of deviating from our practices in the way that we're handling business. That being said, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to having Curtis's be part of the selection committee if it's the appetite for the rest of the committee. So I'll just throw that out there as well. So
I'd like to say thank you for that opportunity. And Judge, you don't have to call me Mr. Hampton. You can certainly call me Curtis. That's what Mike does all the time. So
I hope we're on a first name basis after everything. So okay. Okay, so we've got it noted down there. You guys can all expect to hear something from us. And when we start to get this scheduled, like I said, we're going to the end of the month for applications. So I'm guessing like the first week of October to start, communicating with you guys, setting up some dates to do it. So, okay. Roger that. Any more discussion on the racial inequity chair position? All right, third on the agenda is frequency of meetings. The bylaw states in Article 4, Section B, the council shall hold meetings as deemed necessary by the chairperson or the majority of the council, provided, however, the council shall meet a minimum of twice annually. So what's up for discussion is how often do we want to meet as a group? Is it virtual or in person? I know that virtual tends to work the best for this committee because it gives everybody the flexibility to join the meeting no matter where they're at, and have the opportunity. That being said, I think there's also, some opportunities where we should be in person and get together and just, that collaboration. So I'm opening it up for discussion. Anyone want to chime in? How often do we meet? Once a month? Do we still do that once a quarter? Or I'd hate to go the bare minimum and just go twice annually. I think that you lose some connectivity in that. So I'd like to see at least on a quarterly basis, if not monthly, I would think. So go ahead, I'm open for comments.
Andrew, go ahead first and I'll follow you.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Bingham indicated he would like to see them quarterly. I don't think he has a preference as to in-person or Zoom, because we've been doing a lot of both lately. It sounds like things are kind of slow right now, so quarterly makes the most sense, but he did indicate if things start to pick up again, that it should be reassessed, maybe on a regular basis.
Based on what we're working, if we have some things before us we need to get actively involved in,
Correct.
it becomes more frequent. Yeah. Okay, good. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, quarterly is fine. Personally, myself, I don't mind the monthly meetings, even if they're short. We have an hour and a half. We only spend 40 minutes or 30 minutes just discussing issues. I'm okay with that. There's a lot of things that go on in our legal system that we need to be attentive to, and then the community has issues they want us to address also. But if quarterly is what the group says, that's fine too. I do like the in-person because there's a chance to talk to people. We do a lot of work, behind the scenes and off the table as we talk about other issues. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think that you know, even if we do go to quarterly and have the opportunity to, you know, to always fall back to another position if we get more, you know, more things in play here. But I want to keep that connectivity to the public too, at least from my perspective too. So I don't know if that's too much distance, you know, for a quarterly meeting, or if a monthly one makes more sense. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Other thoughts? We're all busy, and I know I can look around this room and I know you guys are extremely busy. So if it makes sense why we don't have anything on, you know, on our radar per se right now, except for getting our composition of our board put together, which is what we're working on. We've got the bylaws in place. We're kind of getting organized as far as a committee. Then maybe quarterly is good for the rest of the year, you know, and then we reevaluate it at the end of the year. So I'll just put it out there for comment for some type of a consensus here. Any more comment? So could I see a raise of hands on your screen for monthly? Okay. Can I see a show of hands on the screen for quarterly? Okay. So I can put it out for a motion. It looks like more in favor of going quarterly. So can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion. This is Andrew on behalf of Justin.
I have a motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second it. This is John.
Okay, all in favor, say, raise a hand.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Okay, I don't see anything. So motion carries. We'll go to a quarterly meeting schedule, and then the information on that would be forthcoming, and we'll put it together. And I appreciate, so the second part of that is the conversation about in-person or virtual. Is there a preference? I'm open for discussion one way or the other. Is there a preference more for virtual than in person? No. Tim?
I'm just thinking, Mike, if we're gonna meet quarterly, probably in person would be good.
Okay. So how many would like to go at least have 2 of the meetings be in person and the other 2 possibly virtual? Anyone in favor of that? Okay, there's 3 in favor of it. 4. And then how many would like to see it be all virtual for all the meetings, for the quarterly meetings? Okay. How many would like to see all in person for the quarterly meetings? Show of hands. Okay. All in person for the quarterly meeting wins out. So we'll get that scheduled up. We also need to figure out a place where we're going to have hold those meetings, and then something that's easy for all of us to get to. So could I get a motion for all in person for our quarterly meetings?
It's Tim, I'll make a motion for all in person for the quarterly meeting.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that. Andrew on behalf of Justin Bingham.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. All opposed? Okay, the ayes win it. That's so be it, and we'll get that scheduled out for everyone. We'll get that out pretty shortly for you guys. Okay, then, yeah, another thing on the radar, thank you, Karen, for reminding me, is that Sheriff Knezovich, as you know, will be retiring from the county at the end of the year. So we need to put the chair on the radar for us to look at. So expect something, you know, in our conversations to come up somewhere in the neighborhood of probably November. and to have that conversation as well. So,
They get reappointed annually every January.
oh, it's January. Okay. So what happens if he leaves early? Does the person take over?
Vice chair.
All right. So I guess I take over until January. Hey, technicalities, right? So I take over until January, and a new person will start their position in at the end of January. So, okay. Now
Mike,
round
can I have a-
table, huh?
Mike, could I have a quick go back if I could, please?
Yeah.
This is in reference to the frequency of the meetings. What if in the event something comes up and you need to make it an emergency meeting? Will you have that flexibility to do that?
Yes. So what I could do is call for one according to the bylaws. It says as deemed necessary according to the bylaws. And I'll read that language one more time. It said, shall hold meetings as deemed necessary by the chairperson and the majority of the council. So yes, I have that flexibility.
Thank you for that, sir.
Okay, open for round table discussion. If anyone has anything they want to bring up to the group, we're working on.
I do, Mike. Just a couple quick questions here. The restrictions for the COVID have been lifted, is that right? Is the jail under any restrictions at all?
So we haven't, the county hasn't officially, and we just had a department head meeting where this was discussed. We know that it's coming from the governor, but we haven't received anything official here at the county yet, John.
Well, just as I've stated before, I have great concern that we don't have any rehabilitation or recovery programs, any GED or anything offered in the jail for well over 2 years now, and that's a concern for me. Also, last meeting you gave a report on jail population and things like that, and we were down quite a bit during the COVID crisis, but we seem to be creeping back up. Your report a couple months ago leads us at 844 people that are incarcerated in the county system. And I think we were right at a little under 1,000 before all the trouble started. And so we're getting incarceration creep. And to me, that also spells racial disparity creep as well. And so those are things that I'm concerned about. And I'm hoping that we can have these things addressed, get some programs back in there, and see if we can drop that number, through diversions and warrant fests, things like that. It's time for us to move on from the crisis and see if we can use some of the lessons that we learned during when we depopulated the jail and add those to what we're doing.
And I could talk a little bit about that. So we all went through the COVID crisis all together, all the justice system did. And when the COVID restrictions started to lift, there really wasn't any guidance, particularly from the state, on how we're going to get things back to normal and what that looked like. And it had an impact on the courts, certainly, and it had an impact on the jail as well. If you look at our demographics of our jail right now, we have approximately 200 that have a Class A felony. And of those 200, the average length of stay on those folks is about 200 and some days, all the way upwards to 900 days in jail. And these are backlogged from the cases that haven't been resolved yet, working through our Superior Court system and so forth. Okay, so that's one thing that's going on. So the people that we have in jail for the more serious crimes are tying the beds up longer, and it's not getting resolved as quickly, John, as as it was before. And certainly we need to make some traction on that way for case resolution and so forth. Class Bs are the same way. Their approximate length to stay on those is somewhere, and I've got the actual numbers. I'm just giving you approximates right now, but their average length to stay is in 100, so 100 range. And then when you look at the Class C, a lot of those dropped down because of the Blake decision. A lot of it was associated with that. Their numbers went down, and so their lengths of stays are down in the 50 range. But when you're talking about an A, B, and C felon, these are not the ones that we're plugging in necessarily in the program. These are the ones that are pretrial status, waiting to go to court and, and get their cases resolved. And then the gross misdemeanor population, I think, was 90 at the time. No, I don't even think it was that high. I think it was 60 when I looked at it. No, not the gross misdemeanor, the misdemeanor population. And all the rest is constituted by the gross misdemeanor, which is DUIs and domestic violences. So the composition of the jail right now is really a serious issue because we've got a lot of cases coming out of this COVID restriction that we've got to resolve and get moving forward. And then on the other side of it, we're down 35 officers. So when you're looking at 35 officers being down, they're working copious amounts of overtime to keep the building running. It's a 24-hour post. And so those guys are really stretched as far as staffing goes. The population that you're used to working with, John, that goes out to Geiger is dwindling because that was predominantly our sentence population and some of the other population that went out there for programming, but there's not as many of those hitting the jail at this point. So the population out there has dropped down to the hundreds, 150 to mid 80s or so out there. And several of the floors are closed down because we had to move the staff that were out there down to the jail to help us offset the shortages downtown. They're significantly troubled right now because if we lose another 5 officers, I believe is what they're saying, 4 to 5 officers, they're going to have to shut another wing down out at Geiger and bring the staff downtown to help offset the overtime. And so the next question is, where is everybody going? Why are the staff leaving? A lot of them are going to pursue law enforcement jobs. They're the younger folks that have come in and they've already been through our process, the hiring process, background investigation, and those type of things. So they're easy to move into those positions. And so we've lost several to them. I understand that city police right now are looking to hire a large number of police officers. And I know that we have 7 to 15 that are looking to go that way in the next month or so. So these problems that we have are just significant problems that the detention services is going to have to focus on. And I wanted to bring that up, and I'll also, of course, take any other agenda items that you guys want to bring up and put on the agenda. But I wanted to bring that to this next quarterly meeting in a report on how we're doing and show, through data and trend line where we're headed on this. So we've really got to make some progress in getting these cases to move forward in order to free up some space inside the jail so that we can get it moving. So.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, but I understand that you're in a crisis with regard to manpower and those kind of things, but each incarcerated person represents a family. They have children and significant others, parents, brothers and sisters, and the COVID crisis is, for all practical purposes, over, and yet my friends who are incarcerated are suffering because of that, and that's just unacceptable. We have to be able to, the drug offenses, nonviolent offenses, we were down to like just over 600 inmates during the crisis, and I'm not understanding why we're like 200 more all of a sudden that things have lightened up, and that's just a question that's out there. And so I hate to put pressure on, but it's a great concern. It just affects more than just the incarcerated individual.
I can't speak for the law enforcement, John, and maybe the public defender or the prosecutors could talk about this. But I think a lot of those policies they put in place during the COVID are still in place, John. I think what's happening is that the cases at the higher level ones that I was just talking about aren't moving through the system quicker, as quick, whatever word you want to use for it. So they're tying up the beds at the top end. So 800 looks like 800 because of the amount of cases that aren't moving. So let's say it's the 600 population that you were talking about during the COVID pandemic, it could still be occurring, and those policies, catch and release, all of those things could still be occurring. But because the cases that are on top are not moving out of the, going through the courts system as quickly, mainly because of COVID, it's a backlog. There was a lot of things that had to change at the court, and I know Judge Maurer can speak to that. Tremendous amount of things had to, it caused a backlog. And I think what we're seeing is a backlog plus what you're talking about as far as the drop in the population of 600. And then, Amy, yeah, can you comment on that?
So I think some of the comments that Mike shared, I think it's important to understand that when you're talking about the sentenced population, right, we have more discretion in types of treatment, you know, what we can order them to do essentially. And
Yeah.
so that's post disposition. And so I think it's interesting that Mike said that actually out in Geiger, which has been primarily the sentenced population, that population is dropping, that number is dropping. And so if the statistics are the same as they were 4 or 5 years ago when Jackie was here doing her work with the data, what we continue to habitually see is predisposition. So those folks who are pre-trial, they're waiting for their cases to be resolved. And even prior to COVID, right, the gross majority of folks sitting in custody were going to be those folks on misdemeanors. And generally speaking, on misdemeanor bonds of $5,000 or less. And so the question becomes, what is going on with that population of folks? In the district court, we have no backlog due to COVID. So we had actually been able to hire an additional court commissioner throughout COVID and subsequent to COVID, you know, right on the heels of it, 2020, 2021, and we got caught up. But you know, they weren't citing as much, John. So during COVID, they weren't citing as much. There's been some different policies also enacted, but we're starting to see, right, as they are adding to their ranks, be it charges coming in on DV. So even those could be city charges, but those are going to get, depending on the severity, you know, brought over to the county. DUIs, you know, they've got more officers on the street. So we're going to see those charges going back up. But the challenge that I think that at least our level of court is, how do we address those folks sitting pre-trial, knowing that we cannot sentence them to go get treatment yet, or go get even evaluated and start, say, you know, there are underlying driving mental health factors. You know, we can't affirmatively order them to do anything like that because they have the presumption of innocence. And I think that it's a balancing act between recognizing those rights, but then also trying to dig out areas where there might be opportunities for diversion so that we can get them tied in, even pre-trial, to the proper treatment or the proper educational opportunities, wherever those things may be, while they're in the course of waiting for their cases to resolve. And I think that's where the pretrial release program that we've been working on, and my understanding is we've gotten 2 responses now, so that's good. And that really is also an effort to address that population. How do we get them out? How do we, you know, have the correct criteria so that we're doing that safely for those individuals, you know, so we're balancing community safety concerns, but ultimately, because you're right, John. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really interesting. I just got back from a conference in Washington, D.C. that was judges throughout the United States, as well as psychiatrists, and the chief justices across the United States have said that we really need to be putting a focus into mental health, because that is many times what's driving the addiction, driving the crime, you know, and all of those things. And, you know, the sooner we can get those people evaluated and get them in with services, the better off they're going to be. But we also have to do that with the recognition that they still maintain that presumption of innocence, and we can't affirmatively order them to do that. Now, we can divert them if there are diversion programs in place. Currently, one could argue that our system lacks that, you know, in different ways. And so I think those are the opportunities that we can look at to try to get at that populations that you're speaking of, because we heard from a gentleman who spoke to, you know, this complement of judges and doctors. And he said, you know, at the end of my prison term, I basically was an expert at playing cards and playing basketball, but I had received no treatment. I had received no programming. I sat in there for 5 years and I was no better off at the end of that 5-year term. So, what had I learned at that end of that term that would give me the life skills to reengage when I came out in the community so that I would not re-engage in the criminal activity that brought me into that system. My mental health had not been addressed. My educational status had not been addressed, et cetera. So you make a very valid point.
Yeah, I'm not, and John, understand me, I'm not making excuses for the pot. I'm just telling you what the dynamics is going on right now. And that's, we've got to catch up these cases. We've got to get the length of stays back down to a manageable amount instead of, where they're at right now. And, but I do think some good policies have been put in place. I know district court particularly has got some good ones that are going on. And I know that the law enforcement also has done some changes in who they cite and release and those type of things. But, it changes it fast. And I think it's going to take us a little time to unbury, from the COVID thing on the justice side. I really do. So.
Well, I appreciate Judge Mauer's comments. I hope that I look to our prosecutors to put some pressure on so that we can get the programs back in place, look at the diversion policies, and start moving away from this. It's just, we can't have people just sitting around playing basketball and playing cards. They need to move on with their lives. They need to be with their families. And so it's just troubling that things are moving so slow. I know there's lots of reasons for that, but I look back to the little boy or little girl who's going to school without one of their parents. And I know it breaks everybody's heart. And so I'm just reminding everybody that we're in that situation. We're all fine sitting here in this meeting. There's people down there playing basketball and playing cards, and their family is going nowhere.
Yeah. And, Kelly can contest too that, when we reduced the staff out of Geiger, we had to reduce the IOP program, which was part of the diversion program. So we're trying to get some staff built back up so that we can get that program running again. And the same with the work crews. It's across the board, John, that we've taken these hits at. So.
I understand, Mike. I appreciate the council letting me vent for a little bit on the issue.
That's what we're here for. So. Anybody else?
I would just say, John, it's interesting because it's probably just really top of mind just because I got back yesterday from it. But mental health is driven by lots of different factors, but certainly one of them is social determinants, right? So what kind of economic access you have, what kind of education level you have, has the person ever been a prior victim of trauma? Have they suffered child abuse? But the fact that I found most surprising was that for those folks who are diagnosed with a significant mental illness or challenge, that the social determinant of whether or not one of their parents had been incarcerated was higher in determining whether they would have a mental health issue than whether or not they had been a victim of abuse. And I was very shocked by that statistic. So I just found it very interesting.
Okay, anybody else?
I'd like to just make a comment if I could, please. I certainly, as a community person, I appreciate this conversation that we're currently having. In fact, as of today, I look online, look at the county dashboard, and today we have 856 current inmates. We booked 68 and we released 95, and that's a plus, obviously. But the data dashboard that we have access to, I think it's a great tool. I guess my question is, the person that's in charge of the data dashboard, is there a way to look deeper at the numbers that they're documenting? And specifically what I'm getting at is that I know from doing some court watches, sometimes we have an excess amount of continuances. And if there's a way we could document the continuances that we're having and understand why we're having them, that would make a small dent in the situation that we have. And I think anything that we can do, even just a minimal amount, will improve our situation. I want to go back to something Judge Mauer just said about education. As a person that's trying to mentor young men, my goal is my philosophy is that education is the key to what we're trying to address here, because you look at the people that are currently incarcerated, usually there's an education issue. As we she mentioned earlier, there's a mental issue. Some of these people are homeless. So if we can do a better job of being proactive as opposed to reacting when they get to jail, we'll do a better job. And that's just a comment I want to make. Thank you for having this conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I just am ready to convene a task force made up of the Superior Court and prosecutors and public defenders. We're going to sit down and we need to sit down together collectively and just share our thoughts and where we're going, and look for some of the bottlenecks that might help us out on some of these cases. And then, do we have available manpower, or do we even have available space to have another judge that's able to hear some of these cases and help get the ball going a little bit better. But I think I sent the invitation out, Colin, today, didn't I, on that one? So we're going to get going on some of these things, Curtis, to look at everything that's involved. I know that the case standards, I know that during COVID, I think some of those were halted for a time being as far as the time periods on the cases. I don't know to what extent. I'd have to do the research, Curtis, to find out. But that has an impact. In the long run, exponentially, it has an impact. And so those are the kind of things that we'll be looking through and see what we could do to try to free up some space. Like I said, if we could get down to a manageable length of stay, down to the 90-day range or in that period or 100 days, and still, provide adequate counsel, adequate, court hearings and the things that we have to do, then I think that the bed turnover will help us to get back out of this continued, overcrowding stage that we're in right now. But that's going to take a ton of work, and it's going to take a ton of commitment to do it. So, yeah. I really don't have anything else. You guys are probably sick of listening to me talk anyways. So I think what we should do is have one person from the group always have to manage this thing. I think, no, I'm kidding. That'd be totally fun. Make sure you put your name in for the chair, will you? So, yeah, and Ozzy's away at training. That's why he's not here today. So I get to do it again today. So any other questions or anything before I convene? And Curtis, why don't you and I catch up? So I'm gone. I leave next Wednesday to Florida, and I'll be gone. But can you catch me the week after next? I'd like to have coffee with you and sit down and talk some things.
I'd love to. Just hit me up when you get back. And are you on a part of a vacation or work?
Well, I'm going there because my son has been invited to go play lacrosse at the college level from Spokane at the D2 level. So he's going down there to see if he has the ability to play at the D2 level. They're going to go through a couple a scrimmage, and then they're going to do a kind of a half game. And then also he wants to be a pilot, and so they have an avionics school there that he wants to be involved with. And so it's Lynn College, which is just outside of Miami, I guess, not too far from there. And so that, but and I, you don't know the outcome of how that's going to go. He's in flight, he's doing ground school right now. He's been up a couple of times in the plane. I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to freak him out too much, get up and be afraid of heights and that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going. And then the following week, I'm going to the MacArthur Foundation, conference, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'll be over there for that part of it. So next couple of weeks, kind of hit and miss, Curtis, but I want to spend let's go have coffee or something to go sit down and talk about something.
Yeah, first of all, I know you're not a proud parent or anything like that, but congratulations. And yeah, hit me up when you get back, please.
Well, I'll give you another bit of news. My daughter, I took over 2 weeks ago. She got accepted to Duke, and she's going through the nursing program at Duke right now, we drove her over to North Carolina. And I don't know if any of you guys have been to North Carolina, but it is awesome. Might move there in a second. That's a beautiful place. But the better news of that is that it's a 2-year accelerated program. She applied with the Veterans Administration. They gave her a full ride for her education, and then she owes them back 2 years of working in the VA hospital when she's done. So it was like $100 or $150 or $175,000 lottery ticket. I just couldn't be more happy about that. So Yeah, I have a lot to be thankful for. I do.
Double congratulations.
Thank the Lord, yeah, because it's definitely been a good year for me, so. All right, well, then we shall convene on a quarterly meeting, try to get us on the track for that, right? So, all right, you all, well, have a good day. And I will talk to you soon.